The crystal glass slipped from Eleanor's hand and hit the coffee table with a dull thud, splashing wine across the Persian rug. She didn't bend down to clean it. Instead, her eyes remained locked on the elegant white envelope on the table. The embossed crest was unmistakable. Preston Whitaker, the man she had almost called her husband, was now sending her an invitation to his wedding with someone else. "He has to be laughing at me," she muttered through clenched teeth as her jaw tightened. Across the couch, Nadia Brooks, her friend and personal advisor, carefully picked up the invitation. She opened it slowly, read the gold-lettered message, and let out a low whistle. "This is pure cruelty, Eleanor. He knows you'll get media coverage. He knows it'll hurt. This isn't just an invitation, it's a message." Eleanor snatched the paper back and crushed it in her hand. The look in her eyes, usually cold and calculated in boardroom meetings, was now sharp, almost wounded. "You know me, Nadia. I don't show up anywhere to play a supporting role. If I go, I'll be the main event." Nadia leaned forward, intrigued. "Then go with someone. Don't give him the satisfaction of thinking you're alone." Eleanor took a deep breath. The idea made sense, but who to bring? Anyone from the elite would seem forced. She needed something no one would expect, a move that wouldn't just answer the blow, but return it with interest. Later, on the way back to her apartment on the Upper East Side, the image of the invitation still burned in her mind. The night was cold, and traffic along Madison Avenue formed an irritating symphony of horns. As she stepped out of the car to enter a restaurant, a movement on the sidewalk caught her attention. A man was sitting near the side door, leaning against a worn-out backpack. His clothes were dirty, the sides of his shoes split open, but what caught Eleanor's attention wasn't the apparent poverty. It was his posture, back straight, eyes alert, as if refusing to bow to the world. She approached, hands in her coat pockets. "Do you need money?" she asked in the same tone she would use to offer a contract. The man slowly lifted his face. There was something defiant in his gaze, almost a sarcasm ready to fire. "What is this? Some kind of social experiment? Depending on my answer, you toss a coin in my lap or walk away pretending I never existed." Eleanor raised her eyebrows. She wasn't used to hearing that kind of insolence, but instead of walking away, she gave a faint smile. "I have a proposition. I want you to accompany me to an event. You'll be paid enough to change your life." The man let out a short laugh, thick with irony. "Change my life? Do you always talk like that when you want to sound like a savior, or is today special?" "I'm not trying to save anyone. I just need someone willing to wear a good suit and hold a glass without dropping it." He tilted his head, studying her calmly. "So basically, you want a luxury puppet for one night. If you're not interested, I can find someone else." This time the laugh was loud, open, almost mocking. He stood up, dusted off his pants, and stepped closer until he was just inches away. "I don't see any line of candidates out here, so I'll take it. But only because I'm curious." Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "Curious about what?" He smiled, an enigmatic glint in his eyes. "Curious to see how far a woman like you is willing to go." For a moment, Eleanor was speechless. She recovered quickly, extending her hand. "Eleanor Vance. Jordan, just Jordan." He shook her hand firmly. Minutes later, already inside the car, Eleanor watched Jordan from the corner of her eye. He kept his gaze on the window, following the city lights, as if it wasn't his first time seeing Manhattan at night. No nervousness, no hesitation. "You don't want to know where we're going?" she asked. Jordan slowly turned his head, a half smile on his lips. "Somewhere expensive, I assume. You're not curious?" "It's strange enough that you pulled me off the sidewalk to take me God knows where. But no, I don't think you're trafficking humans, if that's what you're worried about." Eleanor let out an involuntary laugh. "Nothing that dramatic, just a wedding. Jordan didn't hide his interest. "And you want revenge?" She turned her gaze forward, surprised by how quickly he figured it out. "And if I do?" He shrugged. "Doesn't matter to me, as long as the check's signed." Eleanor studied him in silence. His calm was almost provocative. He didn't seem like a desperate man, nor someone impressed by the opportunity. There was something there she hadn't figured out yet, but one thing was already certain. Jordan wasn't just a stand-in. As the car cruised down the illuminated FDR drive, Eleanor leaned her head against the seat. The plan was still unclear, but for the first time since receiving the invitation, she felt a flicker of anticipation. Maybe she had found the perfect piece for the game. And Jordan, eyes fixed on the reflection of the city over the East River, seemed to be smiling to himself, as if he knew more than he let on. The door of the black Bentley Bentayga shut with a deep thud as Eleanor stepped out first, followed by Jordan, who was adjusting the worn-out coat he still wore. The driver, wearing impeccable gloves, opened the umbrella, but Eleanor waved it away with a curt gesture and walked straight toward the mirrored glass building on the corner of a narrow Soho street. "This is it," she said, without slowing her pace. Jordan looked up. The discreet metal lettering displayed a name he recognized from whispers: Sutherland Row Atelier, one of the city's most exclusive grooming and tailoring salons, where executives and celebrities reinvented themselves before major events. "You brought a homeless guy to the Millionaire spa. That's going to be great gossip in the back rooms," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Eleanor didn't stop. She pushed open the double doors, letting the scent of fine woods and Tom Ford products fill the space. "Today, you're not homeless. Today, you're my date." The maitre d' approached immediately, wearing a light grey Xenia suit and a polished professional smile. "Miss Vance, always a pleasure. What can we do for you today?" She pointed to Jordan, who crossed his arms, calmly surveying the space with quiet irritation. "Full transformation. Hair, beard, skin, tailoring, shoes. I want everything ready before the end of the afternoon." The maitre didn't flinch. With a single gesture, he summoned 2 barbers, a style consultant and a tailor. Jordan was led to a brown leather armchair, but before sitting down, he threw out a challenge. "If you want to back out, now's the time, Eleanor." She crossed her arms, staring at him. "Are you scared?" "No, I just thought you'd be expecting someone more impressed." Eleanor gave a half smile, almost amused. "And you're not impressed by anything?" "Not by this." Jordan leaned back as the barber adjusted the cape over his shoulders. "I've been in this world before." The sentence hung in the air. Eleanor frowned, but the maitre interrupted, asking her to wait in the lounge. Reluctantly, she made her way to a side room with a blue velvet sofa, a coffee table, and bottles of Perrier Jouet, ready for the most demanding clients. The hours dragged on. Eleanor scrolled through messages on her phone, took a quick call about a board meeting for her biotech investment firm, but her mind remained stuck on Jordan. "I've been in this world before." The phrase echoed like a dare. When the maitre finally called her back, she walked down the hallway and stopped in front of the large oak door. Her heart beat slightly faster for no apparent reason. The door opened. Jordan was standing beside a full-length mirror. The man Eleanor had seen on the sidewalk just hours earlier, disheveled, worn clothes unshaven, now looked like a distant stranger. His once tangled hair was now perfectly cut, with subtle volume, slicked back with controlled shine. His beard had been shaped, accentuating his strong jawline. The midnight blue suit, custom-made by a Brioni tailor, fit like elegant armor. A silk vest completed the look, and the polished leather John Lobb shoes reflected the room's soft lighting. The most striking detail, however, wasn't the outfit. It was his posture. Jordan stood there as if he had always belonged in that space, shoulders back, chin up, hands in his jacket pockets. There was no surprise in his eyes as he looked in the mirror. Eleanor took a moment to find her words. You don't look surprised. Jordan turned his wrist, adjusting the cuff button. Because I'm not. She narrowed her eyes. Then who are you really? He took the tie the style consultant had just adjusted and loosened it slightly, as if it were second nature. I'm someone who knows how to make the most of a good opportunity when it comes. Eleanor slowly circled him, examining every detail. The transformation was flawless, but what unsettled her was his calm. Anyone else would have been impressed, grateful, maybe even stunned. Jordan simply accepted it, as if he already knew that reflection and had merely reclaimed something that had been erased. I'm not sure I like all this mystery, she admitted. Then you'll have to get used to it, he replied, his gaze steady. The maître cleared his throat, handing Jordan a small case containing platinum cufflinks from Cartier. Jordan took them naturally, as if he wore expensive jewelry every day. Eleanor watched, even more intrigued. Minutes later, the two returned to the Bentley parked outside. The driver opened the rear door, and Jordan stepped in first, settling in with the ease of a seasoned executive. Eleanor slid into the seat beside him, and the car pulled away toward the Hudson View Pavilion in Jersey City, where the wedding was taking place. The silence in the vehicle was nearly uncomfortable. The city lights reflected on the tinted windows, and the low purr of the V8 engine filled the space. Eleanor crossed her legs, resting her arm on the backrest. You're very quiet. I'm enjoying the silence, he said, looking out at the skyline. She frowned. Most people in your position would be enchanted by all this. The car, the suit, the event. Jordan gave a soft laugh. Maybe I'm not like most people. Eleanor stayed silent for a few seconds, trying to gauge the tone of his answer, but she realized pressing him wouldn't yield results. He wasn't a man who gave up information under pressure. Outside, the bridge loomed ahead. The nighttime Manhattan skyline glowed behind them, while ahead, the event hall appeared, lit like a colossal jewel by the river's edge. Eleanor adjusted the simple black Givenchy dress she wore that night and took a deep breath. The game was about to begin. Jordan, beside her, kept the same calm, enigmatic expression. A man who shouldn't have impressed anyone, but now looked ready to own any ballroom made of glass. The door of the Bentley Bentayga opened with a sharp click into the cold air as the driver stepped out for Eleanor. The flashes started instantly, bursting like a string of lightning bolts. Photographers lined along the red carpet, jostling for the best angle. She stepped out first, her black Givenchy gown sweeping across the carpet, the Cartier Panthère clutch held firmly in hand. Jordan followed moments later, and the effect was immediate. The murmur in the crowd swelled, voices overlapping in hushed speculation, phones snapping up hurriedly to capture the unlikely couple. He adjusted the cuffs of his white shirt, subtly revealing the platinum cufflinks, and paused beside her. The contrast was as striking as it was deliberate. The millionaire woman known for never appearing with a date, and the mysterious man no one recognized. Smile, Eleanor muttered through her teeth, tilting her head slightly toward the flashes. And tell me if you want to leave. Jordan turned to her, a half smile playing on his lips, almost insolent. You brought someone all the way here just to run away. Doesn't seem like your style. She didn't reply. His hand slid naturally into hers, and together they began walking down the red carpet toward the entrance of the Hudson View Pavilion. The muffled conversations around them didn't stop. Women whispered to each other, trying to guess who he was. Men raised their eyebrows, studying him as if they could decode him from posture alone. From the top of the interior staircase, a couple watched the arrival. Preston Whitaker, impeccable in his custom Tom Ford suit, maintained his rehearsed smile, though his eyes narrowed briefly at the sight of Eleanor with another man on her arm. Beside him, Addison Carr, the bride, adjusted the veil pinned to her perfect chignon, the white Oscar de la Renta gown shimmering under the chandelier lights. As Eleanor and Jordan approached, Preston stepped forward, feigning surprise. "Eleanor, what an honor! I didn't think you'd accept the invitation." His tone was too syrupy to be sincere. Eleanor met his gaze, ice cold. "Of course I accepted. I never turned down a good show." Addison tried to step in, but her eyes landed on Jordan, and for a moment, her perfectly composed expression faltered. "We haven't been introduced," Addison said, extending her hand with studied grace. Before Eleanor could speak, Jordan had already stepped forward, offering his own hand, firm, assured. "Jordan, a pleasure to meet you." His voice was polite, but carried a firmness that made Addison hesitate for a fraction of a second before returning the handshake. "That's strange. I feel like I've seen you before," she said, raising her eyebrows slightly. Jordan held her gaze, unfazed. "Maybe. The luxury party circuit's smaller than it looks." Addison masked her discomfort with a tight smile. Preston quickly lifted a glass of Dom Perignon. "Let's toast to the night." Eleanor picked up a glass from a passing tray, and before anyone could say more, raised it toward them. "I wish you all the happiness. After all, marriage is a serious commitment. I was once engaged here in New York. Didn't work out. The truth always shows up sooner or later." The line sliced through the air like a blade. Addison held her smile with effort, and Preston cleared his throat, trying to hide the awkwardness. It was Jordan who broke the silence. He raised his own glass, his posture flawless, gaze steady. There was nothing in his demeanor that resembled the man Eleanor had pulled from the street just hours earlier. "To honesty," he said. The toast rang metallic in the air. Addison took a quick sip, but her eyes stayed locked on him, as if desperately trying to place where she'd seen that man before. Jordan leaned in toward Eleanor and spoke quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "Do you want to dance, or would you rather stay here and watch your ex-mother-in-law squirm trying to remember me?" She stifled a laugh, but answered firmly, "Let's dance." He held out his hand, and she took it. Together, they walked away, leaving Preston and Addison frozen, struggling to recover their expressions. In the main hall, the vaulted ceiling with crystal chandeliers cast golden light over tables adorned with arrangements of white roses and orchids. A string quartet played a classical version of "Fly Me to the Moon." Jordan led Eleanor to the center of the dance floor. "You know how to dance?" she asked quietly, testing him. He placed a hand confidently on her waist and began guiding her. The movement was fluid, assured, like someone who had practiced more than once. "I know enough," he replied, meeting her eyes. "And do you know how to have fun, or is playing games all you've got?" Eleanor held his gaze. "I play to win." Jordan smiled, spinning her precisely. "Then I guess this will be a long dance." People began to take notice of the couple on the floor. Whispers spread again. Eleanor saw the effect she wanted. All eyes were on them, including the brides, who watched every step Jordan took with growing tension. As they moved to the music, Eleanor began to feel like she wasn't the one leading the game after all. Jordan always seemed one step ahead, as if he already knew every piece on the board before they were revealed. And that, more than any jab from Preston or Addison, was what truly started to unsettle her. "Miss Vance, you finally made an appearance." A warm voice cut through the music as a group of men approached, champagne flutes of Veuve Clicquot in hand. Eleanor and Jordan had barely stepped off the dance floor when they were surrounded by three heavyweight investors, all familiar faces from Wall Street meetings. Elliot Keene, director of a private equity fund, was the first to reach out, flashing a wide grin. "I didn't think I'd ever see you at a social event again," he said, shaking Eleanor's hand and then eyeing Jordan with curious interest. "Tonight's full of surprises," Eleanor replied, weighing each word carefully. Veronica Shah, in a silver Carolina Herrera gown, leaned slightly toward Jordan. "And who is the mysterious gentleman?" Jordan simply raised his glass in acknowledgement. "Jordan." He offered no last name, no context. The third man, Martin Cole, known for his bluntness, laughed and nudged Elliot. "I've seen that face somewhere, I'm sure of it. Just can't place it." Jordan took a calm sip of champagne before replying, "Maybe in market reports. I like to keep an eye on movement in sectors like tech and artificial intelligence. Lately, that's where valuation bubbles get scariest." The group fell silent for a moment. Veronica raised her eyebrows, intrigued. "That's not something you hear from just any curious onlooker," she said. "Few people really understand the gap between narrative and numbers when it comes to AI." Jordan tilted his head slightly as if accepting a routine compliment. "It all comes down to who gets the right information before the bubble bursts." Elliot laughed, clinking his glass against Martin's. "Straight to the point. I like him, Eleanor. Where have you been hiding this man?" Eleanor kept her smile neutral, but inside she felt a mix of fascination and unease. He wasn't just holding his own, he was steering the conversation, sliding effortlessly into high-level topics like he'd lived in that world his whole life. It was then that a tall, imposing figure approached. Graham Wilder, a legendary investor known for sniffing out fresh blood in seconds. His Ermenegildo Zegna suit and predatory gaze could make any room fall silent. "Vance!" His deep voice addressed Eleanor first, but quickly turned to Jordan. "And you are?" Jordan extended his hand confidently. "Jordan." Wilder shook his hand and didn't let go immediately. His eyes scanned Jordan as if trying to read his past through his skin. "You look very comfortable here, Jordan." Jordan returned the stare without blinking. "Maybe because I am." Wilder smiled, a rare expression that always came with genuine interest. "I like that." Sensing where this was heading, Eleanor seized the moment. "Jordan's an interesting partner, Graham, but we're not here to talk business." Jordan shot her a glance, laced with irony. "Yeah, Eleanor, sometimes you like to control the game a little too much." She held her smile tightly, but irritation flared beneath it. "If you'll excuse me, I need to steal my date for a moment." Without waiting for a reply, Eleanor grabbed Jordan's arm and pulled him toward a more secluded corner of the room, near the windows overlooking the illuminated Hudson River. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she whispered, keeping her tone cold. Jordan raised his eyebrows. "Talking? Is that forbidden?" "You're drawing way too much attention." The objective was simple. Rattle Addison, not give a TED talk to investors like you're a NASDAQ veteran. He gave a low chuckle, leaning casually against the marble wall. "Wasn't that the plan? Leave everyone wondering who I am? You should be pleased. Not when I don't have the answers myself." Jordan stepped a little closer, his voice dropping to a deeper register. "You don't like not being in control of the board, do you?" Eleanor narrowed her eyes, but before she could respond, a silhouette interrupted the tension. "Hope I'm not intruding." Addison's voice came from behind them, far too sweet to be sincere. She approached with carefully measured steps, her white gown billowing like a cloud, but her eyes were locked on Jordan, scanning every detail of his face. "You two seem to be having fun." "Plenty," Eleanor replied before Jordan could speak. "But I'm sure that's not why you came over here." Addison ignored her, stepping forward until she was face to face with Jordan. "Haven't we met before?" Jordan's gaze remained steady, unwavering. "Maybe, but I doubt you'd remember." A heavy silence lingered for a beat. Addison smiled, but her eyes didn't follow suit. "Memory can be tricky," she said, turning on her heels and walking away slowly, leaving behind a trail of Chanel No. 5 and poorly masked tension. Eleanor exhaled sharply, turning to Jordan with a mixture of frustration and curiosity. "Who the hell are you to leave Addison Carr that shaken?" Jordan didn't answer right away. The enigmatic smile returned as he raised his glass, watching the bubbles rise. "Who do you need me to be, Eleanor?" She had no ready reply. For the first time, she realized the game she thought she was orchestrating was on the verge of changing hands. The side terrace door slammed shut as Eleanor pushed it, trying to muffle the sound of the party behind her. The night air was cold, the Hudson reflecting the city lights, and for a moment she thought she might get a few seconds of silence. But a female voice shattered the brief relief. "Who is he, Eleanor?" Addison was there, leaning against the wrought iron railing, her posture impeccable and her eyes burning with suspicion. Her white Oscar de la Renta gown swayed gently in the wind, but there was nothing fragile about her. "Jordan," Eleanor replied without hesitation, crossing her arms. "My date." Addison let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "Don't treat me like an idiot. That man doesn't act like someone you picked up at some charity dinner. Who is he really?" Eleanor held her gaze. "Maybe you should be more concerned with your fiancé than with my date." Addison stepped away from the railing and stopped in front of her, eyes flashing. "I know when I'm looking at a threat, and that man didn't just show up in your life by accident." Eleanor leaned in slightly, her voice laced with venom. "And you, Addison, know better than anyone that some appearances are only the beginning of something bigger." A tense silence settled. Addison's expression hardened. She adjusted her veil and left the terrace without looking back. Eleanor stayed there for a few seconds, feeling her heart race. Addison was rattled, and that meant the game was working. When she returned inside, she found Jordan alone, watching the orchestra as if the rest of the party were just background noise. He sensed her approach and spoke without taking his eyes off the music. "Addison came after you, didn't she?" "She did," Eleanor confirmed, "and she's shaken." Jordan finally turned to face her, a subtle smile forming on his lips. "Good. Shaken people make mistakes." Before she could respond, Preston appeared, asking to speak with her privately. Reluctantly, Eleanor followed him to another terrace where the music was muffled. "Who is that man?" Preston asked bluntly, his teeth clenched behind a polite smile. "You seem obsessed with someone you don't even know," Eleanor shot back. "I know you. I know you wouldn't bring someone like that without a reason. And this guy..." Preston paused, choosing his words. "He doesn't belong in this circle." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, taunting. "And since when do you decide who belongs?" Preston stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm warning you, Eleanor. Addison already suspects something. Don't play with fire." She took a step back, her expression icy. "You're the one who invited me to this circus, Preston. Don't complain if I brought the show." He opened his mouth to respond, but she had already turned and walked away, leaving him alone with his own anger. Inside the ballroom, Addison had resumed her role as the perfect hostess, but her eyes followed Jordan from a distance, as if trying to piece together an invisible puzzle. With each passing minute, more guests approached him, and Jordan remained composed, talking, smiling, giving away nothing. Eleanor felt a dangerous mix building inside her, irritation at not being able to control him, and fascination with how effortlessly he moved among social predators who would trample anyone in their way. "You're enjoying messing with me, aren't you?" Eleanor muttered as she approached him again. Jordan turned, raising his champagne glass. "I'm not messing with you, Eleanor. I'm just showing you the game can be played more than one way." She took a deep breath, holding back her irritation. "Don't forget, I'm the one who brought you here." He stepped closer, his voice low and firm. "No, Eleanor. You just open the door. The rest, I already knew how to do." She stood in silence for a moment, not willing to admit it out loud, but fully aware of a discomforting truth. Jordan wasn't a pawn. He was, perhaps, a piece capable of flipping the entire board. And across the ballroom, Addison watched them with a look that carried more than jealousy. It was fear. Fear of recognizing in Jordan a ghost from a past she thought was long buried. While the guests laughed, toasted, and danced beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers, the invisible tension between the three, Eleanor, Jordan, and Addison, tightened like a stretched wire ready to snap. And for the first time in a long while, Eleanor wasn't sure which side of the wire she was really on. The sound of clinking glasses in the ballroom was muffled as Eleanor slammed the car door shut in the early morning hours. The Bentley Bentayga had pulled up in front of the boutique hotel in Tribeca, where she had booked a suite for Jordan to spend the night. The silence between them was heavy, thick with the tension that had built up throughout the evening. "Get in," Eleanor said curtly, walking ahead of him toward the elevator. Jordan followed at an unhurried pace, adjusting the midnight blue suit jacket he still wore as if he'd just stepped out of a boardroom. In the elevator's mirrored reflection, Eleanor noticed what irritated her most. He looked far too comfortable. As soon as they reached the room, she turned abruptly. "I want answers, now." Jordan closed the door behind him, leaning against it like someone assuming control of an interrogation. "Answers about what? Who you are, where you came from, why you act like someone born into this world when I found you on the street, wearing torn clothes and reeking of cheap alcohol." He raised an eyebrow, completely unshaken. "So you did some digging?" "I tried," Eleanor snapped, her hand clenched into a fist, "and I found nothing. No records, no recent documents. It's like you don't exist." Jordan let out a half smile and walked over to the room's panoramic window, the lights of the One World Trade Center glimmering in the distance. "Maybe because I really don't exist." She crossed her arms. "Don't play games with me." He was quiet for a moment, then spoke, his voice low, like he was confessing something he hadn't wanted to say. "My name is Jordan Hale, son of Thomas Hale, founder of Hale Enterprises." The name hit Eleanor like a punch. She knew the story. Thomas Hale had owned one of the biggest construction firms in New York until a scandal involving corruption and embezzlement of public funds destroyed the company and ruined the family. That's not possible. Your father was crushed," Jordan cut in, his voice laced with restrained bitterness, "accused of crimes he didn't commit. The real scheme was orchestrated by another family, a partner that betrayed him." Eleanor stepped closer, her heart racing. "Addison..." "Exactly," Jordan confirmed, turning to face her. "Her father was the architect of my father's downfall. They falsified documents, siphoned money in the name of Hale Enterprises, and when everything exploded, they blamed Thomas. My family lost everything. My mother couldn't handle it, and I chose to disappear." Eleanor raised a hand to her mouth, absorbing every word. "So that's why Addison was so shaken when she looked at you." Jordan nodded. She recognized the past she tried to bury. The silence that followed was dense, broken only by the distant wail of sirens on the street. Eleanor's mind was spinning. Suddenly, everything made sense. His composure with the investors, Addison's reaction, Preston's suspicious gaze. "And you?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why did you accept my offer?" Jordan took a step toward her, his gaze steady. "Because this was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. To show Addison that the ghosts she created haven't vanished. And because," he paused, studying her expression, "because you opened the door." Eleanor drew in a breath, unable to look away from him. "You want revenge." "Not just revenge. I want justice. I want her to feel what she made my family feel." She stepped back, trying to regain control. "You could have done that on your own. Why involve me?" Jordan sighed, his expression softening for a moment. "Because you've got scores to settle with her too, don't you?" Eleanor froze. It wasn't a secret that Addison had stolen Preston from her years ago, but hearing it from Jordan hit differently. He continued, his voice low and full of conviction. "We were both hit by Addison, just in different ways. You lost a fiancé, I lost an entire family. Maybe it's not a coincidence that we found each other." She stared at him, her chest rising and falling quickly. For the first time, she realized there was more at play than pride or provocation. There was something deeper, almost inevitable, that connected them. "I don't trust you," Eleanor said, but her voice lacked its usual force. Jordan stepped even closer, now just inches from her. "You don't have to. Just decide whether you'll fight with me or keep pretending you can beat Addison on your own." His gaze burned into hers, and Eleanor sensed that whatever choice she made now would change everything. But before she could answer, Jordan's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen and showed it to her. An anonymous message. "If you think you can hide behind her, you're wrong. The past always finds a way back." Eleanor felt her stomach drop. It was Addison. Jordan deleted the message, his expression hardening. Then the war has already begun. And Eleanor realized, for the first time in years, she wasn't sure she was ready for what came next. Eleanor's phone vibrated violently on the marble kitchen counter of her Fifth Avenue apartment. She set down her half-finished cup of illy coffee and answered immediately. "Talk," she said, skipping any pleasantries. On the other end, the voice of the private investigator she had hired was thick with urgency. "Addison made a move, Miss Vance. She hired journalists and is putting together a dossier. Her target is Jordan. She's planning to expose the Hale family bankruptcy, manipulate old records, and paint him as an opportunist." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, trying to keep the fury rising in her throat from boiling over. How long until it goes public? Maybe hours. Some of the doctored files are already in reporters' hands. "Hold them off as long as you can. I'll take care of the rest." She hung up without waiting for a response. Jordan was sitting shirtless on her Roche-Beaubois leather sofa, his hair still damp from the shower. He watched her calmly, but there was tension in his eyes. "Addison?" he asked. Eleanor nodded. "She's ready to destroy you publicly." He didn't look shocked, only crossed his arms. "They've done it before. I survived once. I can survive again." "No, Jordan." Eleanor walked over and placed her hands on his shoulders. "You're not going to survive this time. You're going to win." At that moment, her iPad pinged with notifications. Headlines were already flooding news sites. From street to schemer, who is Jordan Hale? The fallen heir trying to sneak back into high society. The photos showed Jordan lying on a park bench months earlier, a picture clearly taken without consent. He picked up the tablet, read in silence, and then let out a dry, ironic laugh. "They're fast." "They're cowards," Eleanor corrected, "and Addison's behind every word." Jordan tossed the device aside and stood up. "Then let's strike back." She frowned. "How?" He stepped closer, voice low and steady. "I've got nothing left to lose, but Addison has an entire empire built on lies. If the right evidence surfaces, she'll be the one begging to survive." Hours later, Eleanor walked into the Harrington Club, a private venue where Addison had called a confidential meeting with shareholders and allies. The air reeked of Macallan 18-year Scotch and Cuban cigars. Addison, in a crimson Valentino gown, held court at the center, flashing polished smiles. When Eleanor entered, accompanied by Jordan in a flawless Armani suit, whispers erupted. "How bold," Addison said, narrowing her eyes. "I thought you'd be too ashamed to show your face after everything." Jordan stepped forward and placed a thick envelope on the table. "Shame is what you'll feel when this hits the papers tomorrow." Addison laughed, but the confidence in her voice wavered. "What is that?" "Accounting records, forged contracts, offshore transfers in your father's name," Jordan said, unwavering. "Every piece of evidence proving that you and your family were behind the fall of Hale Enterprises." The room went silent. One of the shareholders grabbed the papers and began flipping through them, frowning deeply. Signatures, dates, even audio recordings. He muttered in disbelief. Addison reached for the documents, but Eleanor was faster. Don't touch. The DA already has copies. This meeting is just a courtesy, so you know what's coming. Addison's face turned pale, then twisted into rage. You can't do this to me. At that moment, the doors burst open. 2 NYPD officers entered, flanked by a prosecutor. Addison Carr, one of them called, you're under arrest for financial fraud, embezzlement, and market manipulation. Shock rippled through the room like electricity. Addison stumbled back, her sophisticated facade cracking. This is outrageous, she screamed. I'm Addison Carr. Eleanor crossed her arms, ice in her voice. And now you're also a criminal. Jordan stood still as the officers cuffed her. Addison struggled, her eyes burning with fury. This isn't over, she screamed, locking eyes with him. You'll regret this. He held her gaze, his voice like steel. I've already lived regret. Never again. The officers dragged her out under a barrage of cell phone flashes. The room, once loyal to the Harrington name, was now silent with shame. Investors murmured among themselves, realizing they had backed the wrong horse. Eleanor turned to Jordan, and for the first time since it all began, allowed herself a real smile. You're free. He took a deep breath, as if finally exhaling a weight he'd carried since boyhood. No, Eleanor. His voice cracked slightly but steadied. We're free. And in that moment, under the stunned gaze of New York's elite, Eleanor realized the game didn't end with Addison in handcuffs. It was only the beginning of something new, something they would have to build together. The sound of rain tapping against the tall windows of Eleanor's apartment filled the silence of the room. Jordan slammed the newspaper shut and tossed it onto the glass coffee table. The headline screamed in bold letters, Harrington Empire crumbles after Addison Carr's arrest. It's over, he said, breathing heavily. It's finally over. Eleanor, seated on the navy velvet sofa, watched him quietly. There was something different in his expression, relief, mixed with a calm she hadn't seen in him since the day they met. It's not over, Jordan, she corrected gently. This is just the beginning. He walked over and sat beside her. So what comes next? She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. Now, you rebuild your life, and I want to be by your side while you do it. Jordan let out a short, almost nervous laugh. Do you know what you're saying? I don't have anything, Eleanor. No name, no fortune, nothing but the weight of the past. She gave a faint smile. Then we'll start from zero. I have the resources, you have the vision. We can build something together. He looked at her for several seconds, trying to detect sarcasm. But there was none. Only sincerity. You'd really give up your independence for this? I'm not giving up anything, Eleanor said, leaning in, her voice unwavering. I'm betting on us. That night, they made the agreement that would change everything. Eleanor would use part of her fortune to found a new company, but Jordan would set the direction. The name they chose, Hale and Vance Consulting, a tribute to 2 stories crushed by Addison's schemes, now rising from the ashes. Weeks later, the glass-walled office on Madison Avenue began to take shape. Boxes of Apple computers, Herman Miller furniture, and a small team of young analysts gave form to the new empire. Jordan walked among them with the posture of someone born to lead. This is it, Eleanor said from a distance, watching him. You're back where you've always belonged. He smiled, but said nothing. A part of him still carried the fear of losing it all again. That same night, Eleanor found him on the building's terrace, looking out at the lit-up city. The wind tousled his hair, but his eyes were fixed on the skyline. What are you thinking about? She asked, stepping closer. I'm wondering if I deserve all this. After years on the street, forgotten, now I'm back like nothing ever happened. Eleanor cupped his face gently. You deserve it, because you never gave up, even when the world gave up on you. He pulled her into a tight embrace, as if afraid to let go. You gave me back my life, Eleanor. She smiled against his chest. And you gave me a reason to live. Months passed, and Hale and Vance Consulting grew quickly. Sustainable investment projects, tech startups, and strategic alliances turned the firm into a rising force in the market. In every meeting, Jordan proved he was more than a survivor. He was a visionary. One spring afternoon, Eleanor arrived at the office and found a small box wrapped in Cartier ribbon on her desk. Inside was a silver keychain engraved with the initials H and V. To remind you of what we built together, said Jordan, appearing behind her. Eleanor laughed, touched. You know you didn't have to do this. I did, he said seriously, because this symbol is more than business. It's about us. That night, during a quiet dinner at a restaurant by Central Park, Jordan finally found the courage. He took her hand across the table and spoke firmly. Eleanor, I lost everything once, but since you came into my life, I've realized I can have it all again. Not just business or wealth, but love. I love you. She was silent for a moment, tears threatening to fall. I love you too, Jordan, more than I ever thought I could love someone. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet blue box. Inside, a Harry Winston diamond ring sparkled under the soft restaurant light. Marry me, not as my business partner, but as my partner for life. Eleanor brought her hand to her mouth, stunned, but quickly nodded, smiling through tears. Yes. Jordan slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed, ignoring the subtle glances around them. Months later, the garden of a Hamptons estate became the setting for their wedding. Eleanor, in a custom Vera Wang gown, walked down the aisle with confidence. Jordan waited at the altar in a classic black Tom Ford suit, eyes misted with emotion. You look stunning, he whispered as she arrived. And you look nervous, she replied, smiling. Before friends, allies, and even former critics who now respected them, they exchanged vows. Eleanor, you found me when I was just a shadow of who I used to be. You didn't just give me a second chance. You gave me love I never thought I'd have. I promise I'll never let anything come between us. Jordan, you taught me that strength isn't about control. It's about resilience. You made me trust again. I promise to stand beside you through every win and every fall, because I know we'll always rise again. Their kiss sealed not just the ceremony, but a new life. Music echoed through the garden, and the guests applauded as they danced beneath the hanging lights in the trees. Months later, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. On a sunny morning, she handed Jordan the positive test. He fell to his knees and wrapped his arms around her. We're going to have a family, he said, his voice breaking. Finally, a family of our own. Eleanor ran her fingers through his hair, overcome with emotion. And this time, no one can take it from us. As New York kept moving at its relentless pace, high above in their Fifth Avenue penthouse, Eleanor and Jordan were living a new story. Not of downfall or revenge, but of rebuilding, love, and hope. And deep down, they both knew that the shock they caused that night at Addison's wedding wasn't just the start of a scandal. It was the beginning of two lives that were always meant to collide and rebuild everything together.
What it meant to you. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. This is really important for the channel. Really important. And if you're ready for another story of love and hope, click the first card or the second one to watch the full playlist. See you there.